Aloha and welcome to E Hana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. And Happy New Year, coming up in a few days. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute, and we welcome you. Every week we interview movers and shakers, people who shape the thoughts that are floating around here in Hawaii, and we welcome you from all across the world. Today I have the privilege of talking with a friend of mine, Kam Napier, who is the editor-in-chief of Pacific Business News. And you know, this is kind of a quiet time here in downtown Honolulu. Many people have left, they're vacationing, maybe just working a little more slowly, not as much traffic, fewer people walking around. What a great time to reflect upon the year and its stories, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. Kam, welcome to the program.
Keli'i, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Good to see you. I think you're such a brilliant guy that, you know, we should
goodness.
probably be paying you something for being here today and your thoughts, but you've got quite a position there as editor-in-chief of our leading business magazine.
I do, thank you, yes. It's a lot of fun. I've been there since late April and been learning a lot. You know, you can be born and raised in a place, but when you are able to focus on one aspect of it, you realize there are so many new communities to meet and people to know and things going on.
And you have quite a diverse background in terms of your journalism and your professional career here in Hawaii, working in museums, and then ultimately you were editor at Honolulu Magazine for quite a while.
Right. I was with the magazine for 19 years, 8 as editor. Left last year. I was doing my own thing for a while, and then met PBN and thought, this is going to be fun.
Well, how do you
I would love to do this.
How do you make that transition from a magazine focused on culture, the arts, and so forth, to the hardcore business world of mergers and acquisitions?
Right. Well, you know, stories are stories, and the craft of telling a story well translates no matter what your focus is. And you know, I think one thing that's been constant for me is a fascination with what people do for a living. You know, how do they do what they do? How do they strive to be good at it? And how does all that make Hawaii work? So it's fascinating to be able to explore that.
Yes, and certainly, you know, the life of business in Hawaii is clearly interesting.
Yes.
You're doing an interesting project, and that's what came to my attention recently. I was reading PBN, and I noticed that you've been doing a countdown on certain surveys that have been taken online and so forth. And I thought, you know, why don't we just walk through some of those today? And kind of like the greatest hits of 2014. We'll be a little bit like Siskel and Ebert, thumbs up or thumbs down.
Sure.
Now, you do informal surveys. These aren't scientific surveys, and it's a very limited demographic, but it's your online readership. Tell us a little bit about them. What do you know about the people who read and subscribe to your Pacific Business News and then respond to these surveys?
Yeah, well, you know, the online world has been such a revolution and an evolution for PBN. If you look back 10 years ago when we had only the weekly paper, and we probably had about 12,000 subscribers at the time, and 4 times a month we'd reach them. And then now, if you look, and so we probably had an audience of about 50,000 people 10 years ago.
All right.
Now we break news every day online first, and in the Friday paper we go a little more analytical with it. Now we tell you more about what these things mean that we've been reporting on through the week. And the growth in the audience has just been phenomenal. So.
How many are in your audience now?
We have about 350,000 people every month between all the different outlets. You know, the print, the 2 newsletters that we do every day, and certainly the online audience.
And I'm sure that they're not all in Hawaii, but still, that's a significant.
They're primarily in Hawaii.
That's right.
But we're also read pretty widely. It looks like on the West Coast. You know, it's amazing the numbers you can see under the hood of.
I'd imagine a good number of your readers are senior leadership in business,
That's true.
Small business, large business, and so forth here in the islands. Very interested in business.
Yeah, our demographic are they're decision makers at their businesses. They're either at the executive level or they own their business. They're entrepreneurs, they're professionals, college educated typically, very engaged civically. They're very interested in how and why things work the way they do. And very committed to the idea of Hawaii being a better place for everyone too. I've seen that.
Well, we'll gain some insights as to what was interesting to them. And you
Right.
did a roundup of your surveys, and
Right.
the 15th most popular, if we'll work
Sure,
through a few
we
of
could
these,
dive right in.
was sticker shock.
Right.
You took a poll. The median price of a single-family home on Oahu just hit $700,000. Your reaction is, what kind of reactions did you get to that?
Well, you know, we write these ourselves. These, like you said, these are not scientific studies. They typically will do these surveys Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And they do come out of things that we're reporting on. So clearly that was news when the median price of a single-family home topped $700,000.
That's right. I thought it was news when it hit 400,000 and then 500,000.
The number just keeps getting bigger. It's always news.
It does.
That's amazing.
It keeps
if it
growing
drops,
and growing.
that'll be news.
It'd be interesting to see what your readers thought.
Right.
that
So
was.
so we wrote this one a little bit cheeky. People could choose from answers such as "This is insane," because that was kind of the reaction some of us had on staff. Is, my goodness, we've hit this point, 700,000. We had it as an option, I'm fine, but my kids are priced out.
There you go.
Because we know that that's something people worry about. We had as an option, ka-ching, I'm racking up the equity. 24%.
There you go.
Selected that one.
Well, we have so many different.
Our congratulations
That's
to them.
right. Different demographics are represented here, depending upon where you are in your financial journey and so forth. Also, the mix of people who have lived on the mainland USA, and people who've lived here all or most of their lives.
Right.
Do you sense that for those of us who've lived here most of our lives, this is just part of the price of paradise we have always known in terms of the cost of gasoline. It's come down a little in the last few days, and we're just jumping in the streets, dancing in the streets. But for the most part, we're used to that climbing up, and all we've known in our lifetime is houses going up and up in prices.
Sure.
But then there are people who've lived on the mainland. Do you think they have a bigger sense of sticker shock when they see this happening?
Oh, I would assume so. I think it depends on where they're coming from. The Bay Area has become incredibly expensive, much more expensive than Honolulu. There's also the issue of salaries. We often hear that salaries in Hawaii don't quite match their counterparts on the mainland, so you have a double sticker shock in that regard. And one constant I've heard throughout the year as I've gotten to know leaders in the business community is that retention and recruitment is something that people worry about. And both of those are factors that play into it. For us here, I think we do accommodate in some ways the high prices for things, but the most commonly chosen response in the survey was, "This is insane." So a predominantly local audience was all reacting to the $700,000 mark.
That's right.
Holy cow.
Sometimes I think there's a disconnect between what we realize to be the truth, that the prices of homes are rising incredibly, and that most people are being forced out of the market of being able to afford an affordable home, and the ability to do anything about it, regardless of whom we elect to office. When we do go to the polls, regardless of public policy, it seems that these prices continue to climb. Why do you think that is? Well, what are the biggest factors that you've come across as a journalist?
Sure, the immediate explanation is that inventory is amazingly low.
So basic scarcity, an economic principle.
So basic scarcity of just everyday homes for everyday people. You could say, well, maybe it's wealthy people buying very extravagant homes, but those things almost live in their own market.
Well, you know, Kam, at the Grassroots Institute, we have people who actually sit down and analyze these things, and a couple of factors that rise to the top all the time is, number one, the cost of goods coming to Hawaii, Jones Act and so forth, shipping of things in. But another one is the scarcity factor you mentioned, that we have zoning rules that restrict the amount of housing that we can have to a very small percentage on our islands. You know, do you think that we're struggling in between values, the value of preserving the environment, protecting the aquifer and so forth, and the need to urbanize, the need to grow, the need to provide housing?
I think this is just me speaking personally. There are very mixed emotions that we all have about housing in Hawaii. People will say, keep the country country, and of course that sounds wonderful. We should, we could, why not? And then when it comes time to put the housing in the urban core and people start showing models of 400-story towers, then a different set of people get upset. Say, oh no, we're turning Honolulu into this skyscraper forest, a concrete jungle. So if we can't build anything out in the country and we can't add anything more in the city, what are we going to do? And where do we expect prices to go?
I think that conflict is even felt by some of our institutions.
Yeah.
Take, for example, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Before it actually had real estate, urban real estate to develop on the shoreline, it took a very strong environmentalist position.
Right.
And now it has been in the news trying to develop the Makai side of Kaka'ako.
Right.
And there just seems to be this ongoing tension between two values.
Right.
Here.
Oh, all the time. You know, we worry how much is too much. I think a lot of folks recall the rapid growth of Waikiki.
There you
go. Probably at the time felt uncontrolled. And it went from a quiet little low-rise neighborhood to a very dense, very urban setting. And I think it's instilled a kind of habitual hesitancy to build or develop. That's just my
your readers
opinion,
reflect
or an observation that I've...
Your readers reflect what is pretty much felt across the islands, and that is that these prices are just too high.
Right.
And who knows, maybe PBN will come up with a solution.
Well, when it hits 800,000 in 2015, which is some are predicting.
If you and I are
we'll
still
do the
living
survey
here.
again.
There we
see,
go.
How people feel about it.
The 14th poll that you had, counting down from 15, should Hawaii's minimum wage be raised from its current $7.25 an hour?
Right.
Now, what do you think most people think when they think about raising the minimum wage? Which, by the way, in the 2014 legislature, we did pass, so that over a 3-year period, there'd be an incremental raise to well over 10, quite a bit, to over 1050, I believe, approximately.
Yeah. Actually, the reaction to both of these surveys are interlinked. I would think that people are concerned about the cost of living in Hawaii. We worry about whether or not there's enough affordable housing. We worry about something I mentioned earlier about salaries maybe not keeping pace with their equivalents in the mainland. So if I had to speculate, I would say people feel like this would help folks be able to afford Hawaii a little bit better.
You know, I think you're right that there is a strong sentiment driven by the glaring cost of living in Hawaii, and we also care about the homeless and those who aren't able to afford a basic livelihood. And yet at the same time, and this is that dichotomy, this other side of the coin, I hear business owners complain about this all the time. Restaurateurs, the Chamber of Commerce came out against raising the minimum wage. Small Business Hawaii came out against it, and so forth. And the business owner was saying, we can't afford to hire the poor now. we can't afford to give low-wage jobs to people.
Consequences.
That's that tension
I mean,
here.
these things they're all interconnected. There's no easy fix. You push something here and something else pops out on the other end of things.
Well, how, Kam, do we resolve that on a small island? Because I think there's some validity to both of those concerns. We do want to have a measure that helps the poor and those at the lower wage earning scale, and yet we have to be more robust in generating business and making this a business climate that works for small business owners. How do we resolve that tension on this little island, in this island kingdom? I'm asking you very profound questions.
Well, if I knew the answer to that, I should probably be,
Well, perhaps you know the answer to this one, poll number 13. And that is,
Sure.
do you think CEOs should give up private
this
offices
was a fun one.
and sit amongst other employees, as Hawaiian Airlines CEO Mark Dunkerley now does?
Right,
And I could
right.
hear a lot of CEOs saying, Mark, you shouldn't have told everybody that.
You know, this survey was tied into a cover story that we did in the spring
Yes.
about what's called open plan office layouts, right? Where the cubicle walls
That's
come
right.
down,
Greater
and the
synergy,
bosses come out from their private
accountability.
offices, and everyone sits in a big open room, like it was a newspaper from the 1940s or something.
Well, your readers.
And so we thought, so what do our readers think of this? We had profiled some businesses like Hawaiian Airlines that had done this. I know Architects Hawaii also was in that article, and they have beautiful offices. So 58% of 700 respondents, not too crazy about the open plan office.
That might be because most of your readers are bosses.
Well, maybe. You know, I would be
Perhaps.
speculating, but I thought, you know, it's possible that these are bosses who quite like having a private office.
There we go.
It's also possible that these are respondents whose motivation
Don't
was
want
they
their
would
boss
rather
around.
their boss just
There you
stay
go.
in their own.
We'll
their
come
own
back
space.
after this short break. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. I'm with Kam Napier, who happens to be the editor-in-chief of Pacific Business News. We're just taking an informal walk through headlines of the year. Don't go away. We've got many more to come.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Welcome back to Ehana Kako. We're here every week, and Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the alternative, let's not work together. That's not so good. We believe at the Grassroots Institute in uniting Hawaii's people to work for a better government, economy, and society. And I think that's also part of the mission scope of the Pacific Business News. Pacific Business News has been reporting on the news and also reporting on the people who make business news. I'm with the editor-in-chief today, Kam Napier, and we're taking a year-end stroll through some of the headlines and polls of the last year. Here's another one, Kam. Should owners of homes valued at $1 million, you asked in your online poll, $1 million or more on Oahu, which I think is almost every homeowner, but anyway.
Well, we're getting there.
Pay a higher property tax rate. Yes, no. What's the issue behind this?
Well, the
one here?
issue here was a move by the city council to raise
the
the
tax rates, right.
and
property tax.
And I think some folks thought they were on safe ground by choosing $1 million or more. But of course, as we pointed out in an editorial, with the median price creeping up closer and closer to that, we're talking about homes now that are not mansions, not Trump estates or anything like that. So around the time that we were reporting on this and did an editorial, we also just put it up on our website as a quick survey that people could take, and it was the 12th most popular Business Pulse poll of the year, and 73% opposed the increase. Now
this is one of your most decidedly no votes here. 73% no,
right.
24% saying yes.
Right. Generally, any tax increase we do a survey on is probably going to get us 70%.
There you go.
No. And, you know, when you look at the comments, and people can always add comments through Facebook or right to the website, people were pointing out the same thing we were, that look, $1 million is not that far out of reach. You know, this is no longer a target the top 1% kind of tax hike. This is getting into upper middle class, you know, everyday homes. You've got neighborhoods in urban Honolulu where homes are pretty close to that already, and they're just an ordinary 50-year-old house.
This brings up another issue, and you know that virtually every other day some list of standings of states and their business climates comes
Right.
out, and
Right.
Hawaii is perennially ranked in the bottom 5
Yes.
to 10. And
Yes.
in the most recent one that Grassroot commented on and forwarded to the press, we were ranked number 3 in the nation at the bottom.
Oh,
in terms
well,
of,
I was going to say,
of
what, number 3?
47th in terms of business climate, and a big factor is the tax environment.
Right.
The tax environment both for corporations and for the
Right.
individuals, so you get it either way.
Right.
And now our government is talking about extending an increase in GE taxation to fund
Right.
the rising cost of the rail.
Right.
So
or
I hear,
possibly making it permanent.
there we go. So I hear from business people all the time, and we see in other surveys,
Right.
that is a real sticking point for people.
Oh, I think
in
so.
business here
I
in
think
Hawaii.
so. You know, and the way we phrased it was maybe a little too abbreviated. I think in the moment, people knew that we were talking. The proposal specifically was for homes that were being rented out.
Sure. In this instance.
But you know, again, I would say the same thinking applies. That if you say you inherited a house from your parents or your grandparents in Kam Napier that's now worth $800,000-900,000, before too long, that's $1 million home that a millionaire's tax is being applied to. And if you're renting it out, you know, this is not the same thing as being, you know, some robber baron landlord type of person. You're just renting out a house, right? It's an ordinary commercial transaction.
That's right. You know, on one hand, then you might be thrilled that the equity in your home is rising because
Sure.
the market is driving that up.
Sure.
And yet, on the other hand, you can't do anything about being taxed
Right.
for that and so forth. So it catches us in another one of those double binds that you and
Right.
I were talking about a little
Right.
bit earlier. But in general, why does the business environment, why do business people tolerate the tax environment that we have here? Is it a sense that it's
why
just
do
the
they
necessary
tolerate it?
part of doing business if you're in Hawaii, and living in Hawaii is such a wonderful thing anyway? We're going to stay here. We do know a good number of businesses have closed down this year,
Right.
and owners have left Hawaii because of the cost of doing business here.
Right. I'd have to do a whole extensive number of surveys on our readers to find out why, because that's an interesting question. Why do they tolerate it?
Well,
So I would be speculating, which, you know, I've been known to do.
one speculation that that I'll throw out there, just because we're talking about taxes, is that the benefits from a government that taxes us is being felt by a good number of people who are receiving pensions from the government. We have a fairly high percentage of people in our state who are receiving
Right.
government pensions of some form,
Right.
military,
Well,
federal,
sure. Federal, state, and county. That's
whether
a
you're
large workforce.
a teacher,
and it's
a
a lot of
construction worker.
retirees.
And there is a relationship between the outlays for
Right.
government workers in terms of pension fund and in terms of
Mhm.
ongoing health care, and taxing in order
Right.
to afford them. And I'm just wondering if these are two realities we haven't connected together very well, because we seem to have a voting populace
that's a good question.
that doesn't turn out
Right.
to vote.
Well, voter turnout was quite low, and I think that, and here I am speculating, but business owners, business executives, I sometimes hear people say they just don't have time to get involved. So that's a factor, but you know,
That's because we're all working so hard in order to pay
pay our taxes. It's entirely possible.
Well,
And
yeah.
it's a small community too, and we are very community-minded. We are very communitarian. So I think everyone knows, like you were saying. So there are many people who benefit. If you're talking about pensions for retirees,
Yes.
I would assume a great many people in the business community are related to, married to, friends with folks who are in that other group that's getting the retirement money.
And that's how they get
the pensions. Right. And so I think that awareness kind of plays into a sense that, you know, this is all interconnected. So when the taxes are tied to something very personal like that, maybe there's less resistance, you know.
Sure.
But you certainly see people get much more excited about tax increases for things that are not so clear cut, or where the benefit is maybe a little
That's
more
right.
dubious.
I wonder sometimes if we have a mindset here in our state that receiving those pensions and having government provide large-scale welfare services and so forth
Right.
is a good thing. It's a good,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a necessary good,
Right.
and therefore we're willing to pay the price, which is taxation. There's a response that others who've sat on the show with me have given, and it's probably the most frequent response when I ask the question, why do we tolerate in our state taxes that are higher than we really want them to be? And often I'm told it's because we have a dependency mentality that comes from the plantation days, where we want government to be the Luna, the boss that takes care of us. I really don't know if that's the case, because I've not seen quantitative data that tells us that's what people are thinking.
Right, and we're getting to be a couple of generations removed from
That's
that
right.
anyway.
But I am wondering if the better thesis is this, that in general, the public sees government as being this great provider.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think of things like the unfunded pension liability,
Right.
or the unfunded amounts of the health care program for retirees,
Right.
we see those as things we have to pay for through taxes. It's
Right.
just part of the way it works. And maybe that's a good opportunity to talk about different models of government.
Yeah.
You know, it's no secret that at the grassroots we consider that free market approaches can actually help us achieve a more equitable society.
Yeah.
Well, with that said, and that commercial done for our way of thinking,
Well
here's
done.
number 11.
And speaking of politics, yes, our
and this
11th
is-
most popular
11th
business
one was,
polls
in fact,
survey.
was uncannily timely with
Right.
the demise of Hawaii's last
Right.
governor.
Right.
Who has been Hawaii's best governor since statehood? And your readers said John Burns at 29%.
Right.
Very close, George Ariyoshi at 26%. Linda Lingle tied with George Ariyoshi at 26%.
Right.
Then you had a distant Ben Cayetano at 9%.
Yeah,
But
it drops off
That's
after
right.
that quite rapidly.
after the stars there, and
Right.
then finally at the you've got 5%. And this poll was conducted when? On August 7th,
Right.
before,
Right.
for Neil Abercrombie. And of course, we all know that he had just failed phenomenally in the primary. I would
Right.
wonder, would that figure be so low had he not failed in the primary? Because that became news in and of itself.
Oh, I suspect they're interconnected. That the primary
Well, it's easy to
performance
say
and
after
the
the fact.
popularity probably have something to do with each other. You know, and I was intrigued that when it came to the top of the poll, it was almost a three-way tie between you know, Burns and Lingle and
Well,
Ariyoshi. So you've got two
Sure.
different parties, different generations, all reflected, and also I think for all three, a little bit of time has passed, and I think people tend to reassess. Nobody ever likes whoever's in charge at the moment.
Well, now, of course, John Burns and George Ariyoshi are iconic Democrats. And
Right.
Linda Lingle, of course, is the unique
Right.
Republican here.
Right.
And for her to weigh in almost equal with them, 26% for her, equal to George Ariyoshi, just under John Burns,
Right.
makes me ask this question. Do you have a higher than a normative percentage of Republican readers when
I
compared to
don't know.
the general
I don't know
population?
the answer to that exactly.
Or is Linda Lingle attractive regardless of party?
Well, certainly
Deeply
that.
philosophical
You know,
question.
I do remember the groundswell of support for Linda Lingle when she first ran, and you know, at the time I was covering public education quite a bit, and it was on everyone's mind quite a bit that here we had this crucial function of state government and was not performing as well as we'd like, and among her different planks, Lingle was running on the idea that it was time to change things.
Right, to decentralize the education system.
And I think public frustration was so high at that time that people of all political stripes were intrigued by the idea of trying something new.
You mentioned that issue, public education,
Right.
and I'm wondering if that factored, her position factored into her popularity. I know you were involved in a highly visible project at the time, which has become well known for Honolulu Magazine.
Right.
You headed up an annual survey of schools.
Yeah, the survey came along a few years later, but in 2001, I had written an article called "The Death of Public School" that was that summed up what we knew to that point about just the different ways in which the system was not performing.
And the reason I ask is I'm just wondering whether Linda Lingle was able to cash in on some issues because of the value of those issues to the people, regardless of political label.
Right. Like I said, I think there was a public frustration that transcended political labels, and so she stood out from the field at the time, and at least for the folks who answered this survey, who took this poll online, remembered fondly up there with Burns and Ariyoshi.
Now, this also tells us a lot about your readership, because I would guess that in other circles, George Ariyoshi's name would be revered next to Daniel Inouye. And in other circles, John Burns would be the founding father of the state of Hawaii, and would have moved to legendary status already. And so perhaps you have a rather diverse political group. I know in some circles, Ben Cayetano is a saint.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
Here's your 10th poll, number 10, counting down. And we're not going to get through all of these. This is just kind of fun with my friend
It's
here.
been fun to pull these together.
You know, behind us, of course, we see Bishop Street, and you see right over there next to Cam's Head, the tall building in Brown one. That's where Grassroot Institute is. That's why we show that. But in reality, it's a green screen. And in the program that was here the hour before, there was a bar with bottles of alcoholic beverages. And I kind of feel like you and I are sitting in a bar just kind of chatting.
Maybe we should have kept the bar background. The old school
but
journalism
this is fun.
model.
It's the end of the year, 2014, the last program of the year. Poll number 10. Should Hawaii replace Aloha Stadium with a new, smaller facility estimated to cost $192 million?
Right. That was in the news. We were reporting on it. Thought we'd ask our readers. What do you guys think? Should we?
You know what? It must say something that I don't feel sticker shock anymore when I hear the government talking about $192 million. It's a huge amount of money, but numbers are so big nowadays. Talk about the rail, for example.
Right. You can barely make a summer movie for $192 million.
But your poll respondents said yes, 39%, and no, 57%.
Right.
Hawaii should not replace Aloha Stadium. What is that about? Is that just nostalgia? I remember how I felt about the old
The people
old
are
stadium.
attached to Aloha Stadium on an
the
emotional...
the first stadium in Honolulu,
yes.
the Honolulu Stadium.
And people do still remember that fondly. I don't know that
people feel that way.
That sentimentality was driving this.
Consciousness of the plight we are in financially, in terms of
where we're
unfunded
at
liabilities.
financially. When we look at the comments that people posted, where they volunteer their motivation for voting the way that they did in the survey. One thing we see in the comments on this one was a sense that, look, there are no pro teams really coming through here. And UH does not need a stadium the size of Aloha Stadium.
Well, with that said, we're going to take a short break.
All right.
And we'll be right back, and maybe then Kam can tell us what UH does need financially. This is Keli'i Akina with Kam Napier. We're talking about some of the top headlines in PBN this past year. We'll be right back after this.
Aloha, I'm Hunter Hevlin, host of Sustainable Hawaii here at ThinkTech Hawaii. You can tune in every week on Thursday at 2 p.m. to see interviews with sustainability professionals from around the state and even further abroad, learning about activities with water management, food security, waste management, and a whole host of other fascinating opportunities to get engaged with making a greener island. So if you're interested in making the transition from consuming individuals to communities of producers, check us out every Thursday. Aloha.
Welcome back to Ehana Kako, and once again, we wish you a very happy New Year, which will come about in a few days, or maybe it's New Year already as you are watching this. Every week, we are featuring a program of newsmakers, movers and shakers, thanks to the wonderful work of the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. And I want to say mahalo for all of the great programs to Jay Fidel, the producer of ThinkTech, and the wonderful staff who are here in downtown Honolulu, where we keep our studio. We're talking today to Kam Napier, editor-in-chief of Pacific Business News, just having a fun roundup of headlines and polls that appeared in his publication this past year.
Right.
Kam, let's take a non-controversial one now. How about poll number 8? Do you think the city's move to split the rail station bids
Right.
into 3 sets of 3 stations will really save money? Now, this has really been quite
Just
a circus.
nice, safe, easy topic,
Well,
right?
you know,
your
readers don't think that'll work at all.
No, they don't.
77% are opposed
Actually,
to
it
this.
turns out 77%. Well, opposed, not quite the word. They just don't believe that it'll save money, right? And if you recall, and I believe PBN had the only reporter there at the moment when the city opened the 3 bids to build the 19 stations, and the cheapest of them came in $100 million over the budget.
Now, what's going on here?
And there was a certain
Right.
dismay in the
That's
room
right.
when that happened, and so soon after, the city came up with the idea that they parcel out the stations,
Sure.
the 9 stations rather, into 3 sets of 3. The total for the 3 would be perhaps less over budget. I forget their exact formulation, and we thought, well, what do the readers think? So we posted that survey.
And that's good.
And 77%, they just don't believe it, that it's not going to save any money.
Well, I want to tap into your field a little bit here, which is media and
Sure.
public perceptions and so forth. At the Grassroots Institute, we look at this issue very carefully
Right.
in terms of the costs, weighed in heavily about whether or not we should have gone forward with this plan at this time, given
Right.
our financial condition here in the state.
Right.
But now that it's a done deal, we're concerned on behalf of the public as to whether or not we can afford it.
Right.
But from a public perception point of view, and you may have a finger on this, what do people thinking people think here in the state of Hawaii? That this is just business as usual. Whenever there's a big government project, it's going to cost more.
Oh, the cost overruns are
than-
inevitable?
I
think...
and that's just the way it is.
Right.
Or does our public have a growing sense that, something went wrong here? We're being bilked. Where are we in the spectrum between these 2 positions?
Oh, that's a good question. This particular survey was specifically on rail, but I don't doubt that it's informed by a general world weariness on the part of readers that, a big government project is over budget.
Well, what does the public and what does the public feel?
There, right?
What do business people feel about, for example, we were talking a little earlier about the extension, perhaps permanently, of the increase in the GE tax,
Right.
which was supposed to
Right.
come
The
back
temporary,
down.
the temporary
and so
GE
forth.
tax.
Don't
Right.
people here in Hawaii get suspicious, weary, and upset, and then go to the polls? Well, obviously not. But
No, they take our online surveys,
there you go.
and they vent their frustration there.
That raises a question that we've had all through our discussion. Why the tolerance? Why is the weather that good? Yeah, I mean, it really is phenomenal. It's
Right.
Fabulous weather. I know that from
That
all the
is
people,
true.
including my family members who are vacationing here over the holiday. But is it that good?
Right. Yeah, that is the big question that I do not know the answer to.
Well-
Why? And people are on every issue. So rail, for example. Certainly there are people who love it and can't wait for it to be built and supported it all along. So anytime we're asking, why do people tolerate this tax or that project, every one of those things had fans too.
Yes.
Or has fans.
But we'll take a closer look at this in 2015, because I'm wondering if we're reaching a tipping point on the tolerance levels of people in our islands. We certainly, in some hard figures, are reaching some limits.
Right.
Our unfunded liabilities for state pension,
Right.
state health plans, the financial condition of our state hospital system, and so forth.
Right.
You can't argue with the numbers there. But
Right. The University of Hawaii.
oh,
the Cancer Center.
That's right. And by the way, that leads us to the next poll, number 7.
Mm-hmm.
What is the main factor driving the latest turmoil at the University of
Right.
Hawaii?
And at the moment, just to remind people, the latest turmoil was that UH had just fired its chancellor, Tom Apple.
There you go.
So we asked people what do they think were the contributing factors? Money, politics, personalities, or all of the above? 60% said
60% said all of the above. Money, politics,
And personalities.
But the highest of the 3, money, politics, and personalities, was politics.
right.
So this is the perception of your readers, that it's really not just the lack of money.
Right.
In fact, only 4% said that it was the lack of money, which
Right.
I believe money means here. 13% saw that it was personalities and conflict, but
Right.
23% said it was
Politics.
politics.
Yeah. I think that does show a widely held perception.
And what does that mean?
Politics is
politics. When people say, "Oh, it's all politics," that's what's wrong with the University of Hawaii. Is it our legislature meddling with the university? Is it our governor?
I
What
think
is
people
meant?
mean that, but I think they also mean politics and just the general lowercase p sense of power dynamics within the system. One of the commenters wrote that he lived in a university town for many years before moving to Hawaii. He says, "I learned over time that academia is a hotbed of clashing personalities, clashing agendas, and clashing politics." So anytime you've got a big institution,
Sure.
you've got different power bases within it, and politics gets in there.
There are also hard
In that
costs
interpersonal-
too, and I wonder if enough people really understand how much the things we're committed to cost us
Right.
to keep them going.
Right.
Everything from labor through infrastructure to maintenance and so forth.
Right.
And how poorly linked we may be to revenue sources here at the University of Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what generates revenue? A good football team?
Right.
Or lots of people smoking so that we get lots of money from the tobacco fund.
Ah, yes.
So the newest form of taxation being proposed is taxing what do you call those?
The
E-cigs?
electronic cigarettes.
Yeah,
yes.
I thought that was
now
an
that's
e-cig in your
something
hand for a moment.
I've followed over the years too. Is here you have a new product that does not. It contains nicotine but not tobacco, and yet the move is to apply a tobacco
That's right.
tax.
Well, you
on
know, there was a recent survey that showed that the fastest growing segment in our population of e-cig users is middle schoolers. So there's a sense of justice here that if we fund the UH Medical School, the Cancer Research Center that is,
Right.
through e-cig taxes,
Right.
we're helping, we're using the middle school population to pay for their future education and research. We've only got time for one or two more, maybe one, but this one is most profound. And it may apply to you personally. I'm not even sure where you got this question for the poll from, but Cam, how often do you leave a tip for housekeeping at a hotel? Come on, confess
this
all.
is one of my personal favorites.
There you go.
Perhaps because I really like what I've learned about our readers, that 65% always leave a tip for
There you
housekeeping.
go. That's why you work for your readers.
And
They tip.
15% usually do.
Very
Well, they'll
good.
email me nice things once in a while.
It also
11% sometimes do, and by that I mean comments. Only 8% never do. And I would be speculating, but I think when you live in a place like Hawaii, where the visitor industry is so big, so important, and you've either worked in hotels or someone you know works in the industry, so you have a sense of, look, you got to take care of people. They're taking care of you. They're cleaning up after you. They're cleaning your
Sure.
room. So why would you not leave a tip?
Well, we'll close on this last question because it tells more about your readers than it does about the president or anything else. Where should the Obama Library be located? There were two cities selected by your readers.
So this was back in June.
That's right.
You know, when there was a little flurry of news about progress on this front. You know, and the way we phrased it was, all possible benefits to Hawaii aside, where do you think President Barack Obama's presidential library really belongs among these contenders? And it was one of the most popular business pulse surveys we did over the year, and just over half, 53%, said Honolulu.
Yes, but
40% said Chicago.
there you go.
And you know, I think just out of a sense that when you're talking about Obama's political career, you're talking about a Chicago career, right?
Yes, we don't have time to talk about it, but I want to commend you in closing on a nice little piece that you wrote and published in Pacific Business News, I believe.
Right, online.
In which you took to task those audacious
the Washington
mainland
Post folks who thought
journalists
that,
at Washington Post.
Yes, they thought our bid for the Obama Library was somehow
laughable
funny.
Because we have hula skirts and
Well,
aloha shirts.
we have aloha shirts and palm trees, and they
There we
thought that
go.
was funny. So.
Well, Kam, thanks for writing back and defending Hawaii as a serious business climate.
Happy to do it.
Thanks for being with us today, Kam
Thank
Napier.
you.
We've had the editor-in-chief of Pacific Business News, Kam Napier. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. Wishing all of you, especially Jay Fidel of ThinkTech Hawaii, a very, very happy New Year. See you next week. Aloha.